So they said they couldn't let me know anything, obviously, which was confirmed all throughout the clinic on signage and in the room, and that my doctor would call me and let me know the results. So Matthew and I left that appointment not feeling great, but still like, okay, hopeful, whatever. We won't assume anything until the doctor lets us know. But I just kind of had a feeling like I was like, nothing felt like good about that. My doctor calls later that day and says that they were not able to detect a heartbeat. She did say that it's a very early ultrasound. Maybe I was even like not even quite 7 weeks at that point, and so that's why there was no heartbeat showing up. And she did say that it's not, entirely abnormal to not hear a heartbeat at 7 weeks. It could just be that the baby's measuring very small at that point, and so there's not really anything to hear, even though the pregnancy is fine. So she told me to reschedule another ultrasound to happen within the next 10 days. I booked with that same clinic, and I guess she also requisitioned me some more blood work just to make sure the HCG levels were rising. So I booked another appointment with that clinic, but they weren't going to have availability until more than 10 days after the first one. So I booked at a new clinic, which had much sooner availability, and still kept that same appointment just in case anything. I figured, why not do 3, instead of 2. February 14th was my first one, 7 weeks, no heartbeat. Then February 25th was my second ultrasound, and February 28th was my third. In between that time, I had 6 blood tests, and each one was showing a rise in my BHCG at that point. Fourth ultrasound, March 4th. All of these ultrasounds were both types, so both the ones where it's outside the abdomen and the intravaginal one. The first one I was nervous for. By the fourth one, I was just like numb at that point. I was just like, what the hell is going on? Like, how am I possibly on my 4th ultrasound and still don't really know what's going on? Because there's the blood tests, which are showing, if it was a miscarriage, my doctor was telling me my blood test would be showing a decrease in my BHCG levels, but that's not what was happening. It was increasing slightly rather than decreasing. But then at all of these ultrasounds, they're able to measure the sac or, whatever, but not hear a heartbeat. So by this point, like, Matthew and I were just getting so discouraged. I honestly wanted to go scorched earth. I felt like the pregnancy was over after February 14th. Like, I kind of knew it. Like, I was like, I don't, whatever. Like, I could just tell, So now we're in March, early March. March 6th was when I finally got the confirmation from my doctor, after the 4th ultrasound and the 6th blood test, that yes, I've had a miscarriage. This whole time, I should add, even though it might be TMI, but you saw the title of this, what we're going to be talking about here. Sorry if this is TMI, but I still wasn't bleeding. That's kind of the thing. Like, you're pregnant, you have a miscarriage, you think, okay, well, you're going to start bleeding, and that'll be your first indication that you've had a miscarriage, right? Like, no, the last time I had got my period was in December, and now we're here in March. I still haven't had any bleeding at all, no cramping, no anything. I'm confirming this every time I get an ultrasound, and but finally on March 6th, my doctor did call me and let me know that yes, okay, she's pretty sure that I've experienced a missed miscarriage, and that I should go to my nearest emergency room to basically deal with that and get next steps in terms of how to deal with that, and to get an actual confirmation of that. So I went to the ER on March 6th, and it was a very long wait. If you are in Ontario, you know, you probably know. If you've ever gone to the emergency room, you're going to be there for probably 6 or 7 hours. So I went after work that day. Matthew met me there after work, and we were there until I think we ended up leaving the ER. Okay, so I got there probably like right after 5 o'clock because I left the office I left the office so that I could get there as early as possible. Probably got there like right after 5. Matthew shortly after me. We did not leave the ER until after 1:30 a.m. the next morning. So technically March 7th. But March 7th, I, you know, at the ER, of course, did another blood test, another ultrasound, both types. I actually fainted in the emergency room on getting my blood drawn, which I was really surprised by because by that point, like I had like 6 blood draws, and you know, they draw a lot of blood when they're testing for these pregnancy levels. So I was surprised that I fainted, but I think it was just like the stress of everything. So I fainted, but yes, they were able to confirm, sadly, that first pregnancy, my very first and only pregnancy to date, ended in a miscarriage at 7 weeks. And of course, Matthew and I were devastated, but the actual reality of that took a while to set in just because it took so long, like not just over a month, actually just under a month, to get from first ultrasound on Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2025, to now March, where we're finally getting the diagnosis that, okay, yes, we've had a miscarriage and this is what our next steps are. So it was at the same time, it was a relief to finally know, like, okay, finally, like we just wanted to know. So like now we can take the next steps, because it was like this whole time we're sitting in limbo, like, is our pregnancy okay or is it not? So getting the confirmation, yes, it was sad, but it was, I think both of us first had the experience of emotionally like, okay, now we know, like, okay, I just want to know, thanks for letting me know. What do I do now? How do we, you know, just move past this so that we can start trying to conceive again? Weirdly, the reality of that loss did not hit me until way later. And actually, as I'm recording this, had I not experienced that pregnancy loss at 7 weeks, I would have been giving birth to my first child tomorrow, September 24th, 2025. And the fact that I'm not is, it's like I always think that I'm like over it or like getting past it. I'm like, I'm not going to cry when I talk about it. But then I do, because it's still a loss. I still feel that loss very deeply. Yeah. Yesterday, yeah, took another month and a half for my body to pass the tissue from that first pregnancy. I ended up having to go on 3 different rounds of the medication that's typically given so that the body can pass a miscarriage, which is called misoprostol. Sorry, I just kicked my table. Which is called misoprostol. That was a very a hard experience as well, just taking that medication, because it's something that has to be, it's not taken orally, it's supposited into the woman's body so that she can pass the tissue from the pregnancy. And passing the tissue was traumatic and horrible. And finally in May, I should say late April, I had finally passed all of that tissue. So again, this was another month and a half of more ultrasounds, more blood work, just like, you know, going on 3 different rounds of this medication to make sure that it had finally passed, because it took a long time for my body to pass this tissue, which is another thing that made it hard, because it felt like my body was holding on to this pregnancy so tightly, you know, it just like would not let go. It wouldn't pass all of the tissue for so long. And kind of thinking back, I kind of, you know, hindsight being 2020, I kind of wished I had just done what's called a DNC. It's another option that's given where the doctor medical professional will go in and like remove the tissue through a process. You can Google it, whatever. But I decided not to do that and take the medication because it's less invasive. But if I had known it would take me 3 rounds of the medication to pass all of the tissue, I would have just done the DNC to begin with, so that the tissue would pass faster and that Matthew and I could have been back to the trying to conceive stage sooner rather than later. That by the time we got to our trip to Antigua, which we did this year in April 2025, it was something that we kind of booked actually post miscarriage news to just give us something to look forward to, something to kind of pull us out of the deep spiral of depression that we were both experiencing at very different times. Matthew and I experienced this loss at sometimes, you know, experiencing the same emotions, and sometimes we would not be experiencing the same emotions, obviously. And that was difficult to go through, and it's something that we're still going through, you know, months and months later. But I might make a separate video about that. I don't want this to be too long. Anyway, this is just kind of giving you the timeline to us starting our IVF journey now. So anyway, April 17th to 21st, we went to Antigua as kind of a reset, and that was, you know, an amazing trip. We had a great time, but, you know, still when we got back, we were still kind of processing this and dealing with this. It finally, you know, took us until the end of April to just kind of finally be done with that part of the journey. So finally, I passed all the tissue, and then that brings us to May 2025. May 2025, we actually went to Japan. It was a bucket list trip for both my husband and I. Neither of us had been before. It was something we had wanted to do since before we even got together. And it was something that we booked in January before we knew I was pregnant. It was something that we booked, like, you know, just kind of like, oh, Happy New Year, let's book something like really exciting for 2025. Because yes, we didn't know at that point that we were very early into our first pregnancy. So when we were celebrating, you know, oh my gosh, we're pregnant, you know, knowing in early 2025, we were like, oh my gosh, but what about that trip to Japan? Like, oh yeah, we'll just have to make it work, you know. But anyway, so we get to the trip and it was amazing, fantastic. That's not what this video is about, but I will share all of the footage from that, of course, on this channel. The reason, you know, I haven't uploaded anything about it and we're now in September is because I was, you know, still dealing with the loss of this. I was just not in the headspace of wanting to go through all of that footage, edit it together into something, you know, shareable. And yeah, so yeah, Japan was an amazing trip. It was like the first time in a long time that we felt like genuinely happy again, you know, because we were just in this new setting. Finally, all of the tissue from the miscarriage had passed. So it, like, finally I was not bleeding. So I was just like, oh my gosh, like, like I can't even describe how irritating it was to bleed from like March through to like April, and then, like, you know, it's like every day I'm just like bleeding a little bit, and sometimes it's heavy and sometimes it's light, and it's just like, it was so frustrating. So finally I was through that and I wasn't bleeding, and it was great. And, you know, at the end of that trip, I got my first normal menstrual cycle again, which meant that Matthew and I could start trying to conceive again. So when we got back from Japan, we were in a great mindset, feeling, you know, reset, feeling happy that, you know, my body was back to quote unquote normal after experiencing that miscarriage, and we could move forward with trying to conceive again. And so that's what we were doing for that summer. You know, when we were back here, Japan trip's over, it's back to life, back to normal life. So June, July, August, you know, we were trying, and all 3 of those cycles, you know, nothing. So basically at the end of July was when I was like, you know what, we were just, my husband and I, anyway, just at the end of July, it all just became too much. I was like, we should have been pregnant again by now, you know, because it had really only taken us 3 or 4 months when I first got off my birth control pills way back in September 2024, and we got pregnant, you know, by December of that year, or January of the following year, 2025. And I just thought, like, you know, this should happen again pretty quickly, and if it doesn't, I want to talk to somebody. I want to talk to a fertility specialist, especially because we've now, we're in our 30s and now we've experienced a miscarriage, which puts us, I think in the category of people who should be considering talking to a fertility specialist. So at the end of July, once I got my cycle again for that month, Matthew and I made the decision, okay, we're going to start the IVF process, not start the IVF process, but just kind of reach out to a fertility doctor and just like do some testing, like just find out what's going on, making sure that everything is okay with us, sperm count wise and quality and motility for Matthew, and then for me, everything's okay with my egg production, with actually ovulating, with the structure of my uterus, all of that. We just wanted to make sure that all of that was fine. So getting into that process, we actually started our fertility journey through a service called Rocket Doctor. It was very easy. All I did was went online through Rocket Doctor, booked an appointment for both Matthew and myself to talk to a doctor who then made the referral to the specific fertility clinic that we're now using. There was no cost associated with that. Being in Ontario, that was covered by the Ontario Health Insurance Plan, OHIP for short. It was a very quick process. The call with the doctor was literally just, okay, so your name is this, your age is this, you have been trying to conceive for this long without a successful pregnancy. Okay, confirmed, I'm putting in the referral. That's it, easy peasy. So then we got to August, so now we're in August. So Matthew did his first sperm test August 5th. I did my fertility testing on August 8th, which was yet another blood test and yet another ultrasound. I think now I'm at 8 ultrasounds and 9 or 10 blood tests. Honestly, rolls off my shoulders at this point in time. Like, I used to be so afraid of needles. I was nervous as heck for my first ultrasound. Now I'm just like, whatever, go ahead, draw the blood, whatever, do the intravaginal one. I don't care. So did all of that. August 14th, I went for what's called a sonohistogram. Basically, it's where a saline solution is put into a woman's uterus so that a doctor can get a view of the fallopian tubes. It's really to check if there's any blockage in the fallopian tube that would prevent an egg being released from the ovary to actually traveling through the tube and then going into the uterus. That doctor actually, for the very first time, where I was getting an ultrasound, was able to confirm right then and there, your fallopian tubes look great, there's no blockage, so, that's good. It was weird because that was the very first time where I'd had an ultrasound where the person doing the ultrasound was able to actually give me the results of that ultrasound right then and there. I didn't have to wait for a call after the fact, which I was really happy about. And then my husband and I had our first call with our fertility doctor on September 2nd, where he went over all of our test results with us and let us know that actually we don't have what's called total infertility, where like there's no eggs in my ovarian reserves, or there's no sperm that has quality or motility that is going to lead to a successful pregnancy. Everything was confirmed to be good with my husband's sperm count testing and all of that stuff, and then everything structurally wise was confirmed to be good with my uterus and with my ovulation. The only issue that was confirmed through a blood test that is actually not covered by OHIP and was not actually covered by my insurance either. So I ended up paying, I think it was $150 for it, just out of pocket. But it was a blood test to check my AMH levels, which check for, how many eggs, not the exact number, but like whether you have a high or low level of eggs left in the ovaries. And my AMH results show that I actually have a lower count in my ovaries, and that's something that the doctor wasn't concerned about, just because like being in your 30s, that's something that's going to naturally happen. So, but it is something that makes chances of conceiving naturally every month like less, because you just have, you know, there's fewer eggs to work with in the ovaries. So, and even a healthy couple, in that case, in the case of my husband and I, still have only about a 1% chance of everything going well enough with both of our bodies and getting the timing right to achieve a healthy pregnancy. Sorry if you can hear my dog panting. He's laying beside me on the floor now. But yeah, we only have a 1% chance as a couple who's in our 30s, even with no fertility issues besides lower AMH levels for me. So with that being said, the doctor gave us 3 options. One was medication and intercourse. The medication would have been letrozole, which helps with ovulation. It just helps. Again, I'm very new to this process, so a lot of this stuff I am learning at the same time as I'm sharing it with you guys. But option 1, letrozole and intercourse, but that would only raise our chances of conceiving a very small percent, like that wouldn't even get us up to a 5% chance. The next option would be letrozole and IUI. Again, that would raise our chances to maybe about 10%, which is still not a great amount. And then option 3 for us would be letrozole and IVF, which raises our chance of conception to 50%. Of course, there's drawbacks to IVF, one being that for publicly funded IVF in Ontario, it's a 3-year wait list, probably even longer than that. So that's just not even an option, right? Like if you're already in your 30s and you're on this, journey where you're talking to fertility doctors, you do not have 3 more years to wait around to see if you can get publicly funded IVF. There is publicly funded IUI available that we could try right off the bat. But when we talked about it, and I did some research, which mainly composed of binge watching content just like this on YouTube from other people, families, couples, even single people who had gone through this journey themselves. It seemed like IUI, what I was getting, and obviously I'm just like generalizing, but it seemed like a lot of people tried IUI first, were not able to be successful through a few cycles of IVI and ended up having to switch to IVF anyway, which correlates with the only 10% chance of being successful with IUI versus moving to IVF and then having a 50% chance. So when Matthew and I talked about it, we were like, well, we don't want to waste any more time. We want to be pregnant yesterday. So, obviously going with IVF right off the bat, even though it's scary, and in terms of the cost, it's astronomically more expensive than IUI. I'll just say that. I think for an IUI cycle, it would have been, just about $1,000 all said and done to get everything going with the medication and everything. A IVF cycle is about $20,000. And that's the estimate without factoring the cost of any of the medications, because there's going to be a significant amount of injectable hormones that I'm going to have to, administer at home to get my body prepped for the IVF process. And so the quote that we were given from our clinic did not cover those medications, because those medications can vary in cost, and also until all of that testing is done in the lead up to IVF, the doctor is not sure what medication and what doses are going to be prescribed, which will of course affect the pricing. So all of that to say, yeah, IVF is the more shockingly expensive procedure, and doing it privately, not through publicly funded, is going to be a huge chunk of money for us. But that's the option that we're left with now. And there's a few other reasons that we're considering IVF. Obviously, the much higher chance of success, but also the ability to potentially have multiple embryos that would then be frozen in time right now. So if we wanted to, in 2 or 3 years, implant another embryo and try to have a child at that point, if we are successful with having a child now, and we want to have more children in the future, we would have a better chance of doing that, because we would then be using embryos frozen in time now versus embryos that would then be, 2 or 3 years older at that point, like if we were going to do IUI later at that point, or just try to conceive naturally, or unassisted, try to conceive unassisted with just medication. Yeah, actually, yeah, and the price is actually closer to $26,000. So really, it's probably going to be like a $30,000 procedure, all said and done. And this is assuming it works the first time, right? We might need multiple egg retrievals and transfer cycles before this work. Knock on wood, that's not the case, but you know, it very well could be. So anyway, it's going to be astronomically expensive, but we hope that at the end of this, we will have a healthy, happy child to share our lives with. Another benefit of IVF is that we can test the embryos, assuming we are successful in creating embryos through this process, for chromosomal abnormalities, which is usually the reason why pregnancies result in a miscarriage so early, as our first one did. There was likely something chromosomally wrong with or sorry, not chromosomally wrong, but there was likely some issue with the chromosomes of that embryo, which is why it didn't develop past the 7-week phase. And so by doing IVF, we're able to prevent that in the future by only implanting embryos that do pass that genetic testing and come back clear for those chromosomal issues, which would limit or which would lessen the likelihood of experiencing a further miscarriage in the future. So now, yes, so here we are. On September 11th, I had a call with my husband to go over the IVF protocols with the nurse at the fertility clinic, because we had made the decision that we were definitely moving forward with that process rather than doing the IUI. We're very fortunate that we can even, you know, afford, you know, we can do it. It's a stretch, but yeah, we can do it. We have some help from family, which obviously we're so grateful for. But neither of our insurance through work covers any of the actual IVF process, which really sucks. It might cover some medications, but we'll have to see on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, thanks for hanging in there. I know it was a long video and it was all over the place. I'm trying to get off here because I've been talking to my phone for over an hour trying to get this out. I had so many like false starts on this, like just kind of stuttering and not being able to get my thoughts out on this at all. So yeah, this video marks the start of my husband and my IVF journey to trying to conceive our first child, and I really hope that it's successful. I'm sharing this in the hopes that it's helpful to somebody else, because one of the things that has been so helpful to me during this whole process has been binge watching content just like this from other people who were courageous enough to share their story, because it's not an easy thing to talk about. Every time I think, oh, I can talk about this without crying, I surprise myself and here come, you know, the waterworks as I'm trying to talk about it. And yesterday when I was at work, I actually told my boss, hey, if my husband and I are going to be starting this journey, so if I'm taking more sick days and personal days, I'm not quiet quitting. I'm just, you know, pumping my body full of hormones, and so I'm probably going to feel pretty shitty on some days and won't be able to come to work. And you know, she was totally receptive to that, which I'm very grateful for. She was like, yeah, you know, just keep me updated, or you know, you don't have to keep me updated, so to speak, but you know, if you want to talk about anything, I'm here, and thank you for letting me know. And you know, I'm hoping the best for you guys. So that was really great to finally have that conversation and kind of just let her know that this is a reality. Obviously, it's kind of sad because I don't think anybody wants IVF to be a part of their trying to conceive journey, but for a lot of us, it just has to be. And I'm grateful that Matthew and I can even afford this, that it's something we can even consider, because for couples who have to do this through public funding or who end up having to choose IUI because it's more cost effective for them, it's something, you know, because they just simply can't do the IVF procedure, I can't imagine how frustrating that would be. So I'm glad that, you know, while I didn't want this to be my story, you know, and it would have just been so perfect, right? Like it would have just been so perfect to get off my birth control pills in September 2024 and then September 2025 be welcoming my first child into the world, right? Like how amazing and how just like on point would that have been, but it didn't work out that way. And every day it's like a journey to be okay with that. And like I said, tomorrow is the day that I would have given birth, or, you know, if I had gone into labor early, I could have been giving birth today. And I'm getting teary even saying that. I think that's the trigger, you know, now it's like knowing that, yeah. Like for Matthew and I, even in August, it was very hard for us because we were, you know, thinking, or even earlier in the summer after coming back from Japan, even though I thought, okay, like I'm over it at this point, we can, you know, we can just get back to trying again. It was like, but every month that we weren't successful and every time that I got my period, it was just like, where would I have been, you know, in this point had I not had that miscarriage with my first pregnancy? And it's like, we would have been buying baby clothes. We would have been, you know, painting and setting up a nursery. We would have been having a baby shower and all of that stuff. And now we're not doing any of that. Instead, we're tracking ovulation and, you know, it's just in the beginning phases of trying to conceive again. And that just, it's so hard. It's so hard. Every failed cycle is just so hard to get through. And at one point I remember saying, like, I just want to know, like, I just want to move on. I don't even want to keep trying to conceive unassisted because it's just such an emotionally draining process. Like every month there's that 2-week wait. Like there's two 2-week waits every month, like the 2 weeks to even like get to when you're going to start ovulating, right? Like let's say, okay, you start your period, that's day 1 of your cycle. Your period ends, and then it's really 2 weeks to get into your next ovulation cycle. You get to that ovulation cycle, it's okay, go, let's be hopeful, let's, you know, let's try as much as we can. But obviously life gets in the way, and sometimes you're not able to try, you know, on the high days or the peak days, and it's like peeing on these stupid clear blue test strips and these other, you know, I had a second brand just off of Amazon that are a little bit more like basic, I guess, than the clear blue ones, and a lot cheaper, that I actually see a lot of YouTubers using as well. I'll put in an image of them so you guys know what I'm talking about. But it's just like every ovulation time, like testing every morning and like waiting to see, oh, is it going to be a flashing face, or is it going to be a completely empty face, or is it going to be the solid smiley face? And that means that we can try, you know, these are our 48 hours to try. And, you know, and just being so hopeful, or even trying not to be hopeful, just trying to be like, whatever, if it happens, it happens. And but yeah, anyway, yeah, this video is getting long. So all that to say, we're on this trying to conceive journey. We're at the very beginning of our IVF journey, and I'm going to be sharing, you know, as much as this journey as I can with you guys, because I found videos like this so helpful. And the reason why Matthew is not here is because he's not as comfortable talking about this stuff on camera. I'm not 100% like totally comfortable with it either, but it is something that I want to share. But he would, you know, rather not sit here and just kind of like talk to a phone and record like this. So, you know, I'll record bits and pieces here and there, and I'll put in, you know, footage that he's let me know that he's okay with me sharing. But it's, you know, not likely that he's going to be like, you know, sitting here in these like talking head kind of portion, confessional things with me, because he just feels more awkward doing this kind of stuff. And I totally get it. That's totally valid, you know. So yeah, that's, don't really know how to end this, but so yeah, yesterday I reported my day 1 cycle to my clinic, and I'm booked in for October 1st to go into the clinic for my first like round of testing, now that I know I'm doing the IVF process. Like the testing I did before was just kind of general fertility testing to see what's going on and to give us the options for going forward. Now we know what we're going to do going forward. And yeah, we're at the very beginning of this. So I really hope that one day I'll look back on this video, like maybe on the day that I give birth to my first child. You know, maybe I'll just be laying in the hospital bed and I'll think like, oh, I should watch that very first video, like when this all started. And yeah, I'll just have this Amanda to look back on. So hi, Amanda in the future, and hi, future baby. I know that, I know that I'm going to have a baby someday. I know I will. I have to believe that. I have to believe that. And I do believe it. Like, no matter what, my husband and I will have a baby. We will experience being parents. And this is just the first step to getting there. So, thanks for watching. And my plan is to just share this journey with you guys, as I can. So, yeah, thanks. See you next time. And to everyone else who's out there right now experiencing this, I see you, I hear you. I know this is so difficult and you are not alone in your journey. So